Of course, he realized it was me, and he was just like, they're everywhere. They won't leave me alone. And my only thought was, my God, we have a 3-year-old daughter. What would have happened if she would have walked out? It was terrifying. So I'm like, that's it. So I came up with a plan. So I decided that I wanted to get him in front of any doctor. And that was my first mistake, was that I need to get him in front of a specific doctor. No, I need to get him in front of a professional. I had given up on the idea that I could just walk him into a psychiatrist's office and then they would just fix him up and it'd be fine. I had to do a little bit more work. So I decided to approach him and say that we need marriage counseling because, we're arguing a lot and things aren't doing great. So we need to cancel our marriage. The reason I did that was because a lot of what I was doing and everybody was doing was pointing at him like, you need help, you need to do this, and it's all you. And I think that, at least in our situation, it was like, you're putting too much on the person, and I think they're getting defensive, and how much are they going to really hear you if you're just kind of putting them in a situation where they don't want to be in? So if I take some of the blame and say, yeah, it's our marriage, it's not, this isn't about you, but it's about us. Let's get in front of a therapist. Let's get in front of a therapist and they'll help us. And to my delight, he agreed. So I went to work and I found a therapist. And I found one that was religious based because, especially at the time, John was very much religious based, and I thought it would be helpful for the therapist to bond with John. So I didn't prep the therapist too much ahead of time. I just said that my husband possibly had an undiagnosed medical condition and it might be contributing to marriage issues, and got us in as soon as possible. And it was actually great. We get to the therapist's office and he went over everything with the therapist, talking about, the people he talks to who aren't there, and talking about God's plan for him, and he just talking about everything that his little mind was going through. And the therapist was like, okay, great. Well, I'll talk to Sarah alone for a minute and I'll pull you out later. And he pulled me aside. So the therapist, without me even saying anything, he's like, I can have him diagnosed like today. He even offered to drive him to the hospital and said, I can take him right now if you want me to. And I said, we're not there yet. I'd love it, but we're not there yet. At this point, the therapist understood the assignment, because I just kind of gave him a look like, this is why we're here. It's not to fix our marriage, it's to fix this. And so he kept working with us and just planted seeds, which was exactly what I wanted him to do. We didn't work with a therapist too long. I want to say maybe 2 months. But it was enough. It was enough to get John to realize that, it's not just me, it's not just his parents, and not just his loved ones that are telling him that he needs to get help, but professionals. And it didn't make him realize he needs to go to a hospital right now, but it did make him realize that maybe what he was feeling and the things that he was going through were a part of something bigger. Not long after we were finished with the therapist, John had I want to say he had a big episode, but I think this was the same episode, just got more intense, to a point where he allowed me to take him to crisis, which was huge. I had a lot of different experiences with police and whatnot in the past trying to get him help, but nobody would really help him because he wasn't doing anything illegal, and it's not illegal to be crazy. So I had a lot of struggles with getting him help. So when he allowed me to take him to crisis, I was overjoyed, but I was also apprehensive, like, we're just going to walk in there and send us home. But we went to crisis, me and our 3-year-old and him, and we were waiting in the waiting room. And I'm sitting in the chair and our daughter's kind of jumping around playing, and he was standing like in the side of the room with his arms up, thanking God, praying out loud, and just unaware of anything around him. So they took him back and they kept him. And when I walked out of that crisis with my daughter, without John, and we walked back to the car, and I explained to our daughter where he was and what was happening, I felt like I should be upset and I should be crying and I should be so scared, but I was just so relieved, and I just felt like something wonderful just happened, even though it was totally scary for him. Ugh. I mean, I was definitely concerned with how he would feel in there, but at the same time, I knew that in the long run, it would just be so much better. He would be on medication. He would be diagnosed. He would be treated. My God, years at this point of symptoms, and he's finally getting a diagnosis. He's finally getting treated. I just was able to breathe. So 5150 turned into a 5250. He was there for a couple weeks. I took a leave of absence from work and I stayed with our daughter. It was tough because I'm the only breadwinner of the family, but it was fine. These little pains in the asses were really not even that big of a pain in the ass compared to the victory that I felt of having my husband finally getting treated for his illness. It was his first hospital stay. They did misdiagnose him at first. They said he had bipolar, but quickly they re-diagnosed him with schizoaffective disorder, and which I guess is common from what I heard. So there would be multiple other hospital stays, multiple other medication changes, multiple changes in general for a couple years to follow. But getting him in front of a doctor, getting him in front of a therapist anyway, was the best first step. And I'm really glad that it worked out the way it did. And I'm still forever grateful to that therapist because he really helped. And I don't know where we would be if it wasn't for him. So I'm really grateful. Anyway, that was my experience.